these things connect to your life, to your career, to your relationships. So I'm quite thrilled to have Harold and Mike join us. Gentlemen.
Great to be here.
Howdy.
Thrilled to have you.
Well, thanks so much for that introduction. And I'm happy to be in this new environment, a chance to kind of have a longer conversation, a more engaged conversation. Pace is a little bit slower where we're not following books.
Okay.
We can kind of stop down and just kind of talk about stuff. It could be books, white papers, or just introducing us to some thought leaders who are engaged in the thought leader component that you mentioned, the whole livelihood piece. So happy to be here today.
And I think and I'm thrilled, and I think livelihood lets us go in a lot of directions, but, really focusing on ideas, on learning from other people's journeys. And then I think the component that lights the three of us up all the time is our conversations. Nobody that's watching this knows the fact that we've been talking for the last, 20, 25 minutes, because we could do it all day. And I think that's the glue to me that holds us together. But really being able to broaden our topics a little bit, but always with the focus of how can we ourselves be better and then bring that to our audience.
Right. That's cool.
I love it. Mike, when we were chatting earlier, one thing we were talking about was hope. And I think it's so important right now as leaders and as influencers that we talk about how you continue to have hope. I think it would be a little, I don't want to say tone deaf, but maybe a little removed right now to think that there's another topic that's trending on people's mind. Right? Things that happened yesterday, things that have happened over the course of the year, the past 4 years. How do we continue to be hopeful, be good stewards of our people, while also still keeping some of our politics more in the personal bucket versus bringing it forward into the professional?
I think that's so telling. And I think the conversation we're all having ahead of it was, maybe to frame it out for the audience is, Harold was in a dialogue today with another leader who is a deep believer in the QAnon theories. Yes. And, to Harold's credit, he, being the cool man that he is, listened to this guy. But, I referenced a book called The Year of Magical Thinking, which is written by an author named Joan Didion, famous author, who did not accept that her husband died from a heart attack. So she spent a year setting the table for him, expecting him to come home. All of these things she was doing because she wanted it to be real. And I've been really thinking, and as I was watching yesterday's events, one of the things I kept going back to was, this is where magical thinking ran into hardcore reality. And it's almost like, I think we were talking about it earlier. It's almost like if you go into science fiction, Star Trek, somebody just came off the holodeck and kaboom, here's where we are. I want to hold people accountable to doing the things that they did, and they deserve to be held accountable for that. But I also think there are people that are scared to death that all of the change we've had, and throw a pandemic on top of this, we got a lot of very scared people. Now is not the time to flip the middle finger.
Right.
Now is we may have a chance, and I say we may have a chance to actually start talking. And that's why I was so encouraged, Harold. I know how tough it was. You don't need to go into details, but the fact that you were there to listen to this guy. And my comment to you was, this guy had to talk to you about it because you listening to him was critical. It was for him, not you.
So we've been in this position since March. We haven't had a lot of social interaction. We haven't been able to go out and to, enjoy restaurants, friends, handshakes.
Mm-hmm.
The Christmas season, New Year's season went by, Thanksgiving, for crying out loud, went by, and we were comfortably ensconced in our own little homes, unless, you took a chance and went out. And unfortunately, what happens is we are social animals. And if we're not engaged and interacting, we can kind of get into a little bit of a funk. And if we are limited on our social engagement, we don't have a lot of people to get involved with. You experiment, you look at stuff, and before you know it, you're on a slippery slope to some stuff that may not be normal in public environments. So it was a great opportunity to learn how involved, how intricate, how detailed this alternative space is. I need to know it. It explains a lot about, at least the way I define it, it's the void of leadership. If there is, it's the proverbial sound of the tree falling in the woods. If no one's there, do you hear it? Well, here, if there is no leadership, what happens? And you do a lot of things to fill that void. The approach, obviously, is to be constructive, it's to be productive, it's to help. But if you can't help electronically, virtually, or if you don't feel as if you're helping virtually, electronically, what do? And so you just go kind of down that rabbit hole, at least from my opinion. I'm not judging, I'm just, based on my beliefs, that's where I am. But,
And, one of the takeaways I had from listening to you was the reason it was so important is somebody of the caliber person that you are, for him to be able to say, wow, Harold heard me, gives this guy hope in a very, I think, convoluted, strange way. But, you're right. There's been an absence of leadership, and that's not a political statement. That's a functional reality.
Right.
And so now, how do we, I think the question that comes up is, we got to get through the anger of this. I mean, I'm pissed, but how do we start building a bridge? How do we start getting this away from right, wrong, this binary decision making we've been doing? We have a friggin' pandemic.
Yeah.
We have to get people at a point of safety. The rest of it's crap.
Yeah.
And this goes back to the core of livelihood, of what we're trying to do here is we want people to be able to improve their life. And right now, you need a shot to improve your life that are not going to be available for months.
Well, and there's a lot of fear out there, right?
Yes.
About what that, things that you used to think were guaranteed, right? Everything has gotten turned upside down, from the career space, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got people maybe going through multiple transitions within one calendar year. Companies that were in a brand new year that still aren't in a very comfortable place. So you're talking about, the psychological compression of the strain that everyone is still under and still going through.
God, that was well said.
It was.
Thank you. I try. I think about as a leader, the things that I have to try and do and influence and talk to my people about, and this kind of hurry up and wait. And if you bounce that against the fact that we've been doing hurry up and wait with our workforce for the past 15 years, right?
But the interesting part here, Cynthia, is this hurry up and wait is different because historically we've had customers who were able to, from a retail perspective, leave their home, go to the shopping mall, and just kind of walk around and shop and browse and determine what they want. But here, everything is done either on screen or, it's whatever you purchased before, give me that again. And you don't have a chance to go out, touch, feel, and go from there. So, and if it's my mom, she ain't doing that, right? She needs to. So now we're looking at what is the future we're living in. This is what it is. And historic data is asterisk because it's pre-COVID, which was a more social engaged world, and we're no longer there now. And that's a challenge.
And I think Harold, love the insight, because this is our space for a while longer. It's our space for most of this year. And instead of denying it, instead of, again, coming back to this magical thinking, What do we do with it? And ironically, and with what I'm hearing, I think companies are getting a better handle around this. You know, and to be very distinct and to go into career, when we got shut down in California on March 12th, and I actually know the day well, all the hiring just shut down. Why? It wasn't necessarily that they ran out of money or anything at that point, is they didn't know how to do it.
Yeah. And
I had a client who accepted an offer with a major tech company that day, and then dead air. And she reached out to them. This is, major tech company, consumer, everything, reached out to them and said a week later, hey, I hadn't heard from you. What does onboarding look like? And this, I give the company credit. They said, we have no idea. We're still trying to figure it out. We figured a lot of this out now. It's why people are living remotely and can work. It's why companies are now more comfortable with hiring remotely. You're going to talk to more people, but you will still get hired. So we're learning to adapt. I ironically think business is ahead of government in this, which is typically the way it is. But I think there's a lot of people who are still feeling so fragmented, scared, worried that they're not seeing that there's some good adaptation going on around them. What do you guys think?
I don't think I disagree with that. I think that we are setting new paradigms. And it's not often that you can look at a historic paradigm and then parallel it in a virtual environment. So I think a lot of people are, there's a trust from a corporate perspective. If you're working from home, how do I know that you're putting in the time that you said you would put in?
Yeah.
And how do I know that you'll be productive and the production that you do will be of value? And I think over time, what we've learned is people are going to work the time they work, and they may not work from 8 to 5. They may work from 8 to 11, 2 to 4, and 8 to 10. But the work gets done. And so now you're no longer looking at the microscopic stuff. You're looking at slightly more macro things that as long as I get the product out the door, as long as the project is complete with quality, I'm good with that. I think this is a different type of environment. The social component that work normally brings is a little bit less. And Cynthia, I'm sure you can offer a whole lot of value around that component. And historically, you would have an opportunity to talk around the water cooler just to kind of understand personality fits and relationships and, who are you and how do I relate? You can't do a virtual water cooler yet. So now anytime you're visiting with someone virtually, it is a meeting to develop some outcome as a result of the agenda that was defined for that call. So we're just kind of in the middle of still a pivot, but it's a pivot nonetheless. Cynthia, does that make sense?
Oh, it does. And it resonates a lot with, what we're going through, what I'm engaged in. You don't get that kind of one-on-one time with your leader, with your team, and to the very point you made, Harold, I think there's a lot too of like intellectual stress, right? And that the meetings on your calendar, you are going to show up for, you will dial into, you will either be part of an outcome, drive an outcome. Like there's just less conversation happening, and it's very asynchronous and very specific. And one thing that I know a lot of companies are looking at is when you think about, let's say the leadership wheel, like the Hogan 5, right? To make sure that we don't end up in this highly execution, production focused work environment, because we're all at home, all inside, typing on a keyboard, versus having, the relationship piece that's important to get a lot of things done.
Yeah.
I think your comment is all around, the holistic view of your life. And, I'm going to sound like I'm pitching something here, but it's why we call this the Livelihood Project, right? It is all about that. And the thing that I'm actually encouraged by is as Harold, you were describing the idea of this sort of not one block of time, that you're mixing your life together. And I think that is an art right now. And I think people who can learn to do that are going to be far happier than people that don't, because you're not going to go back to the office full time. Some will, but not the majority. I really believe that you're going to be almost in shifts or going back in 2 to 3 days a week. I don't think it's going to be, Harvard Business Review had a great article on the 3-2-2 model.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think when you look at like California in particular, right? And I know that California was big into the work from home model before COVID, before anything, right? Tech really kind of ushered that in. Mm-hmm. It was glamorous. You could do it anywhere. You've got your really snazzy laptop, right? And it was a perk. I think what will also come out of this pandemic that we maybe didn't pay enough attention to, and this ties into, not only the livelihood of your career, but also your personal livelihood, is the structure of people and their families. Yes. Motorola in the early 2000s rolled out, a 4-1 model. You were 4 days remote, 1 day in the office. And that 1 day in the office was the day you had all your meetings. And they did it because they were having lots of out of office, leave of absence, sick time, what have you. They had, a workforce with an aging, multi-generational homes. And so they saw a need for this. And I think that as we get to a space to where we don't feel like it's dangerous to be near each other, I think you're going to have a lot of family units that say, wait a minute, I don't want to commute an hour each way and not get to have dinner with my family. Yep. Now that I've been like this for a year and a half, this is now part of my social norm. This is now part of my family culture. And oh, by the way, I've still been doing my job. So this shouldn't be an issue that I work, to your point, Mike, maybe I work for 3 hours and then I have an hour where I go do something else. I work during the day and then join a conversation, what have you. This shouldn't even be an issue because it's been going on. I think when vaccine is mass distributed, I think there will be that kind of desire for employers to say, oh my God, come back. We're all going to be together. We're all going to be back. But the family component, I think, definitely has a lot of credence and things we should think about. And also personal safety. My view is different from yours, is different from somebody else's, is different. And there's things that I don't miss, right? Like, yes, I miss the socialization, but I don't miss strep. I don't miss foodborne illness. There's things about being home that not so bad.
Well, the audience doesn't know this, but you recently just did a transition.
I did. Well, I guess I've done 3 transitions in a year. So I was with an organization the early part of 20, and then received an offer to join a tech firm in San Francisco. Was very excited by it. Gleefully joined. And 3 days after joining them, we were in statewide lockdown. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, they were heavily impacted by COVID, right? Which is not uncommon, especially in tech. And then I made another move the latter part of this year. So three changes in a year. I'm trying to be kind to myself as well, because it is a lot. Even if you think, oh, it's not a lot, it is a lot. It's a lot of moving pieces in your mind that you're trying to keep straight.
Yeah, that's cool.
You've been pretty elegant about it too, by the way. We're proud of you.
Oh, thank you. I've had some good coaches on my side that keep my career livelihood, in a good spot.
So bundling up both of those conversations together, it's about balance.
Yes.
Being able to, because I expect there are a lot of companies that just really can't get their heads wrapped around this new virtual world, and there may be a little bit of churn going on with people in and out. And I was talking to a friend who is in customer service. She's done that for 15 years, and the company that she worked for 15 years just didn't adapt to this new model. And so smaller companies, similar things, where she's doing more responsibility from home, new companies smaller. And while the job requires more, she has better balance because she can do it as she sees fit. Nice. The computer manages, the flow of calls and that kind of thing. Before, you had to be in your seat at your station doing what you do so that when your manager walked by, there would be a positive report that the manager would give to the director, who would give to the, right? So now we are about actually performing what's on the bottom line. And that's where the metal meets the road.
And along those lines, great story. To add to that story, I have a client who works for a very conservative financial institution, and he has $1 billion responsibilities in that company. I'm trying to be very careful how I describe it. He lived in the Bay Area, wasn't real happy here, and moved to a beautiful location, in the Midwest. And there's a real interesting question if he's coming back. And yet his company hasn't blinked. And I'm seeing more and more of this, that people are saying, you know what, I'm going to kind of vote with now that geography is less of a concern, I'm going to move to a place where I can feel like my life is more balanced. And I think this is really healthy for us to start going, okay, out of this whole thing, how do I get my life more balanced? And the people I think that have the biggest challenge right now are parents.
Yeah.
Parents of school-age kids.
Yeah.
I work with a lot of them, and they're heroes.
They are.
To be able to do this kind of juggling is amazing.
Yeah.
But and to me, I think more companies, again, I'm always glass half full, but are recognizing this. In my so started, we started our first session in our program at the school last night. And out of there were in the 20s of the students that were there, several of them, their kids were there. And you know what? Fine. The fact that the kids can be there is healthy for the people attending the program. It's healthy for their kids. And you know what? It's not bad for the community either. And I think we're not there yet, but I think that's growing.
Well, I feel like, and I was having this conversation with a female mentor, and we were talking about how, at least as women, we felt like we kind of had to keep very separate, delineation of like, this is my personal, this is my work. They don't intervene. It used to be if someone called and like something was going on in the background, you would apologize or what have you. And now I feel like, to the point you made, Mike, like it's becoming more, common, as it should be. Right? We're not lesser people if we have families. We're not lesser people that you can now see into our homes, and it's set up however it's set up. We're looking at each other through a different, my hope, a more inclusive lens. And this is an experience that really unites a lot of us. If we think about things that have been big, big turning points, right? Like if you think back to 9/11, that really was very specific for New York City. Yes, we all felt it, but it was very New York focused. Europe was sympathetic, but it didn't happen to them. This is really a once in a lifetime. We all remember we were at home for a year and a half. And what do? And it's okay if you don't come out of this with like knowing 3 languages and 16 side hustles, right? It's okay if you just come out of it.
Or it's okay if you can work through your Netflix queue,
right.
Because things aren't going to fill themselves.
Listen.
A man's got to have his goals.
You got to have your goals. That's all I'm saying.
Hey, everybody's got their thing, but I think there was also this when this first got started. My husband and I were talking about this, that it was going to be 14 days and we were all going to grill a bunch of steaks and make a bunch of margaritas, and it was like spring break. Everybody was like, oh, it's extended spring break. It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. Here we are a year, and probably to both your collective points, a year and a half later. And it started kind of well, what are you doing in pandemic? Are you doing this? Are you doing that? Everybody was going to take up all of these things. And it's like, it's okay to just get through this and come out of it whatever you need.
Yeah. It's an interesting time as we reset normal. There's always been some level of co-opetition, especially in the work environment. What'd you do this weekend? Did something more fun than that, or whatever. I cooked something cool, whatever the scenario is. But the piece is, there was an opportunity to share and to compare and to enjoy through both views. Now we're kind of an independent contributor, contributing in a virtual environment where there's no friction to speak of, except for the hour of time that you're on screen with one another. Hopefully there are some other additional components that fit through that, email, phone calls, whatever. But there is that the friction that's being missed, unfortunately. Balance is key. Being able to, so I have my two furry assistants in the office with me as they are waiting for the mailman to show up. And you know, I couldn't really take them to the office. They aren't social so much, but it's fun for me. So as we look at, you know, what life looks like over the next, to be certain for the next 12 months, I'm guessing we're going to still be in the same similar situation. To be certain, vaccines will be distributed and that will help us. I don't know if we're going to go back to the office as we were pre-COVID.
Right.
I think it's going to be like it was, how do you define pre-9/11?
Right.
You don't go back to that.
Yep.
Right.
You just adjust. And I think some great intellect friend, Cynthia, may have said that to me. I'm not sure.
Thank you, Harold Strong. I did want to ask though, Mike, how do we model this? You know, and I'm asking this because, you know, your business is coaching and coaching leaders. So much of mentoring in a professional space really happens physically in that professional space. You pick up mentors in your career as you go along, you're near these people, you're exposed to them. You know, in previous chats we've talked about, and I agree with, you know, don't go to someone on day 3 and say, will you be my mentor? Right. Yeah, that's like texting 5 minutes after the date ends, right? That's just a little too much. But I'm interested to see how, you know, because it's very easy, I think, to get disbalanced working from home. It's very easy to work an 18-hour day.
Yes. Right.
And so really forcing into that balance, and then also in that balance, how do you have that professional and career livelihood? How do you know who is a mentor to maybe connect with or not? What tools are you observing people with in this virtual Zoom, Slack channel, GChat world?
So what I've said, God, it's a great question. And I think it's an important question. You know, we are disconnected physically from everybody. But at the same time, we are more connected virtually than we've ever been before. And geography doesn't matter. So I have seen people make connections with mentors, thought leaders that they've never been able to before. And I will not start storytelling because there's a lot of stories around that. But this is the time that you can really start playing with the idea of, okay, let me not define the relationship necessarily, but let me go talk to somebody who's really damn smart. And let me see what happens with that. In other words, don't necessarily go into it, reach out, but don't reach out with an expectation other than I'd like to hear how you think, what your thoughts are around a topic, and see where that takes you. I think going in with lesser expectations, but a better agenda, and reaching out to a broader audience would be the 3 bullet points around that. Does that make sense?
It does, and I love it. I think that's great advice, because I think those are certain behaviors that anchored us in our careers, or kind of part of our, you know, social expectation while at work, that now we don't have.
And you don't have to stay within your organization like you used to.
True.
You know, I mean, you can reach out to that great author that just wrote a book. You know, I mean, that's part of what the Livelihood Project can be. We are going to reach out to these people because we can, and that's the beauty of this. You can do that as an individual. You can reach out to those people that, gosh, maybe I can talk to them. But again, the idea of reaching out, lesser expectation, but a clearer agenda about what you'd like to talk about, that'll take you some magical places.
I love it.
I really appreciate that conversation. The objective here is, you know, you want to engage, you want to grow, you want to develop. The key to that is the organization that you went through to think through, here's where I need your help, which is a welcome opportunity. Okay, this person's kind of thought through this. This just isn't a cold call.
Right.
So no, I appreciate that. That's great.
And I think what you added there is really important, Harold, the idea that you're not coming to them and saying, okay, I'd like you and I to talk about solving world hunger. Do you have time for an hour next Tuesday?
Right.
No, I want to talk to you about a specific element. This is where, sorry, I'm going to plug the book. The book that we're coming out with in a couple months really talks about relationship building versus networking. And the difference is, I saw a TED Talk you did, or I read a post you did, and there was an element in there of X that I have a strong interest in my career. Could we talk about X for a few minutes?
And that's so important, especially as we are at home.
Yes.
Pretty much in front of the computer, trying to broaden, to grow, to educate, to get engaged. And that's an excellent lead-in, and it's honest, it's real.
I have people doing this, and I had people doing this pre-COVID that were getting great results. A lot of it in that case was literal, was in person. But I've actually seen better results now. I actually saw a senior leader reach out to one of my clients after declining to hire him, but came back to him and said, David, you've got a really cool background. And even though you stepped away for a couple of years, can we talk? I have some thoughts and ideas for you. I've never heard that happen.
That's huge.
And 2 months later, David got a job, between the work we did plus the feedback he got from there. How awesome is that? And that's available now. You're gonna have to stretch a little bit, ask a few questions, but that's available now if you're willing to give it a shot. Hey, they can reach out to any one of us, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, that was tough. Harold's over there going, no.
Well, Cynthia, it may be interesting as a tool as people are looking for ideas, keywords that may help them in identifying, separating, creating some kind of friction story research. Query could be a good solution for that.
I think Query could be a great tool. Query is an algorithm that will help you not only find the keywords that you need to have in your resume or whatever position you're looking for. Query will also rank those keywords, right? So you've got a lot of options in your career. You do, and it's wonderful. And everyone says you need to model your resume for the job that you want. And that can be very daunting. And that's kind of a case of like, well, what does that mean? Right? It's like when someone plays the game, go find me a rock. Not that rock. Not that one. Go back and find another one. And you just keep, touching all these rocks and someone's saying, yeah, no. Well, myself and my husband sat down and said, what if we took the mystery out of that? And what if we built a tool that coaches like yourself, Mike, could really harness? So you're still in that client space. Individuals are still working with coaches like yourself, and they're also getting that really strong refinement, right? You had shared with me, Mike, that in one conversation, you found people got really successful when they became extremely intentional. And when I'm describing Query to people, that's what it is. It is the intentional tool to elevate your resume.
And what it does is, obviously, full disclosure to the audience. I mean, I've worked with your husband on this, and one of the things that I'm really excited about it gets all of the crap out of the way and gets you looking at the data and the information, and then your ability to go from data to action is so much faster. And I think that's important. The idea of being intentional, the idea of doing outreach is great, but you can get flooded with data, and I do see a lot of people hit that paralysis point. So if we, if you can trim it out, and I think that's important. Again, we're not telling people, one of the models that I use in the programs that I work on and in my coaching is, have 3 to 5 conversations a week, depending on how busy you are. And you're not going to do that right away. It's going to take you a few weeks to build it up. But if you're really looking to make a career transition and you have, like the hand motion, 3 to 5. You like that? There we go. Logistics on that one. It's going to go well, because the more you learn through this process, the more you iterate, the more you're able to explain things better about your background and the knowledge of the space you want to go into next. By the way, 3 to 5 dialogues a week is a pretty damn good idea the rest of your life, no matter what.
Yes.
No, that's good.
Yes, you should always be talking to someone, even if it's not, I want that job there, right? You should always be having, because you learn something. You meet someone else. You pick up something that you're interested in you didn't know you were interested in, right? Your friend invites you to read a book, and then before you know it, you pull in 2 other friends, and then you're, creating a career lifestyle service. It's, things happen to you in life that you have, no idea how great they can be.
Well, you realize what you've created here with the Livelihood Project is we're actually going to be doing that. We're going to be, if somebody's doing this, count us as one. I don't want to be 3 voices, but count the Livelihood Project as 1 voice every time we do this, because we're going to be talking about books. We're going to be talking about processes, things like that. I mean, Cynthia, that's the mission you've created for us.
I love that we're in this together. I think all of this was a culmination, right, of the relationships that we had separate, that we built together. And we've had some really meaty conversations, and I think we're going to continue to have them. Mm-hmm. I'm interested to continue to have the conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Mm-hmm. And how do we drive that forward and really be intentional about it?
Yes.
Intentional in a strategic way. How are we expanding opportunities? How are we expanding our candidate pool when we're looking at them, and really being, like I said, intentional and directional in that space? Because it became, I feel like over the summer, and I don't know if the 2 of you feel like this, but it kind of became like the tagline.
It did.
Right? It became kind of the t-shirt moment of the summer. And it's like, I'm glad that someone made a business from that. Absolutely. But at the end of the day, we've got to be very intentional about this.
And I think as candidates too, this is where I want to get this away from, when I walk in as a candidate, I have no power. Mm-hmm. I think candidates should be asking, how are you making our company look like the outside world? I would love to see candidates ask that at every point. That was a deliberate act. I worked at a really great tech company, and my leaders said, you are responsible for making this company look like our outside world.
I love it.
And this is a few years ago, and he and I butted heads on a few things, but I will tell you what, he earned tremendous respect from me and my team because he did that. My team looked like the outside world.
I love it. We're going through some of that on my end. Being in the total reward space, there's a lot of opportunity to partner with, diversity, equity, inclusion programs, and also helping in the sense of belonging, right? Because what feels inclusive to you might not be inclusive to me, but I might feel like I belong or don't based on how I'm treated. It used to be treat others the way you want to be treated. Right. Now it's treat others how they want to be treated, which I think is actually very smart. And then it requires us to go, wait a minute, you mean everyone's not like me? Everyone doesn't think exactly the way I think.
Right.
This is
right. Well, it's weird for the adjustment as we go through this, because people are, first of all, is my internet speed fast enough? Do I have a computer that's working? All those kinds of things as you get adjusted to it. But to the point, it's an opportunity to adjust, adapt, and engage. And I think that's always positive. But this has been a fun conversation.
It's been so great.
And the fact that you brought up my internet speed was really cool too.
Well, and Harold being the wizard that he is.
Not really, but it
was so well integrated, as always.
I think though, connecting back to livelihood and what we're looking to do broadly, every week we're going to connect and have a talk, just as we had when we were heavily involved in our book club. And you'll be able to comment, you'll be able to, communicate with us while we are live. We're also going to post our videos on Facebook and YouTube so that if you want to replay them, we're more than happy to have you do that. And you can also leave chats and comments there, like and share as well. This is a safe and inclusive space. So there's no question that's, really out of bounds. And there really isn't anything that the three of us haven't either seen or experienced, personally, probably, or professionally. Harold and Mike have phenomenal career backgrounds and have experienced different opportunities. So many people I'm speaking with are not a straight line, right? Like we tell ourselves that everything's a straight line, and there's so many moves in between. And so I'm really excited for us to bring that, to our customer group and to our client base, if it were. So until next time, the Livelihood Project, we'll see you guys next Thursday. Thanks so much. Be safe, wear your mask, and we'll talk again. Wash your hands. Yes. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.